Hi, I'm Wild Bill, and this is my latest work. I'm taking time before I begin my audiobook version of Writing the Angel's Trail, which is a major project. This is a minor project, continuing a series that I called Mastering. And this particular version is a short story called The Ghost Army. They called it a Zun Li Chong. It would change battle forever, it was said. The current emperor, Zhu Yijun, third son of the Long King Emperor, was no dummy. As soon as he'd seen Zun Li Chong demonstrated, he had summoned the inventor, one Zhao Shizhen, to his palace. Zhao, too, was no dummy. So both men obtained that which they wanted most, and, as in most things, both lived long enough to see their heart's desires turn to rust. Zhu, pampered beyond belief as a child, fancied himself a mystic, though he was more a baby meddling in a parent's world when it came to things supernatural. The young emperor loved a good ghost story, you see. So each time he heard a new one, its several metaphysical stupidities would become part of his cosmology. To place blame upon the man for his faults, however, is to blame men for being what they are, no matter the times. Happy in his foundry, gunmaker Zhao produced hundreds of the novel combination weapon for the emperor's purpose. Another man, Su the Shield, was given similar largesse. His mission to fashion suits of armor suitable to the planned corps of fire lancers. These most respected of craftsmen were attended by leather workers, alchemists, sages, astrologers, and imperial agents, and brewers, fermenters, and brothels. In these times, Ming was the center of the world, its coastal cities polyglot and as diverse in bloodline as all the rest together. Any sort of road could be had there for a price, be it the glint of gold, glimpse of a shapely thigh, awful-tasting medicines able to transport the soul, or an ideal. When word came to Hangzhou of an imperial decree concerning the establishment of a new military unit, many of us began to consider the advantage that could be taken from it. Nanjing was only 50 miles to the north, but here in Hangzhou, the world moved to a different muse than the frenzied greed of the capital. I read the poster myself, my chin good enough for that at least. The court has empowered the great Taoist wizard, his most esteemed reverence, Mu Shan, to gather men to serve under the emperor in a new cause. Men with weapon skills are being sought by the crown to fill the ranks of a new special unit. A competition will be held in order to determine which warriors in the realm are the best. Of these, 400 will be chosen. There was more, of course. The only thing I cared about was the coda. A substantial fee in gold taels would be paid to any competitors who survived the first round of the competition. I needed money. 14 taels per level of advancement in the tournament would make me rich in 3 rounds. I could survive 3 fights with Ming boxers, imperial spearmen, or Mongol polo champions. I'd been in far worse danger than an even man-to-man fight. I didn't look like a Ming Superman, but I'd been around. Despite the cosmopolitan nature of Hangzhou's colorful citizenry, there were few Dutchmen, as we were called, the term referring to anyone blonde or ginger, but especially those with very white skin. And no light-skinned foreigners got there without having come through hell. I was 28 in the year of our Lord 1590. And I was no Dutchman. My family name was Kaiser, and I had been born Hanoverian. Having served in mercenary companies during the Danzig Rebellion, the Castilian War, and the Ottoman Safavid War, I was no stranger to either combat with the sword or with the musketon. My full name is Johann Erich Kaiser, but here in China I was called Guai Lo, the phrase meaning ghost-skinned foreigner. With red hair, pasty white skin, and a tall, slender build, I was unlike anyone else in port. This was extremely useful at certain times, and more than a little inconvenient at others. Really, such was the power of superstition in those days that those who did not know me half suspected I was a demon from one of the Buddhist hells, based solely on my pallor, eyes, and hair. The dubious though automatic respect I got, based on my appearance alone, was evidence of the power of foreign magic, or of local superstition. I knew I would face fearsome fighters in Nanjing. The great fighting art schools, other than those at Wudang, were located at the capital. Spear, thin sword, fat sword, iron bow, the hooked swords, whip, the archery bow, dart, were all taught according to family tradition, some of it stretching back 1,000 years. But fighting prowess doesn't stop a musket ball, and nothing fools the eyes of a hunter of men. As a foreigner, I would be more carefully constricted in movement and overall inconspicuity. I did not mind. My amusements in those days were those of the inner thoughtscape, the search for inner, personal perfection. Ji Li, a mendicant monk, had told me about the way of no mind, a system whereby the practitioner cleared the decks of divisive or disseminative thought in times of battle. Ignore the inner argument, he'd said. Focus on nothing. This made it easy for me to be alone or in a line while waiting for an audience or interview. I simply closed my eyes and the outer conflicts were dispersed into the void. As for my inner world, it was all a struggle against trepidation, worry, and doubt. I was always glad to get back to it. To the no mind, my weaknesses are enemies, and thus do I defeat them. This day I was in a line that extended for miles, even outside the city gate. Tales of gold are not so common as to be ignored by anyone. Looking at my fellows in line, I automatically judged them, found their strengths and weaknesses, and safely discounted their potential as enemies. The man before me was all muscle, though only as tall as my chin. Earth Dragon. His strength would be in the lower center of gravity, better leverage, and love of wrestling. Behind me, the slender swordsman was Crane, from his walk to the bland dispassion with which he surveyed the competition. In my estimation, the one was a third-rate ship of the line, the second a fast, fearless, fresh-scraped frigate. I wasn't a ship or boat. I was the storm which masters either ship or boat. For the rest, my sense of equals never stirred. There were only we three. The soul-stippled line of human hopefuls before and behind was better suited for the mortal realms. Many of these men were armed, of course. I did not let it concern me, for all around us were imperial archers, directed to kill any impudent enough to disobey the emperor's whims. 6 hours of patience brought me to a desk behind which a board official sat. Looking up at my startling appearance, he smiled. Well, there's a horse of a different color. Name? Ghostface. The Hangzhou brawler? Now this is interesting. You know of me, I sputtered, at last taken by surprise. He yawned politely. Who doesn't? They say you have the shadowless strike. Come on now, I demurred. That's a folk tale. Better hope you're wrong about that, was his answer. Every school has sent its champion here. He sighed, showed me where to make my mark on a long scroll of tough paper. Head down this lane to the fork. Take the left-hand road about half a league. You'll come to an inn with the dragon painted on the lintel. Give the manager this. He nodded, and an attendant handed me a small wooden ticket. This will allow you to sleep on the floor in the main room and give you access to the well. If you want to eat or bathe, however, you'll need money. I bowed. Thank you. The city was busy with trade at this time. Several small wars had sprung up, and the flow of commerce was plumped with the dross of a diaspora composed of Uyghurs, Scarfheads, Portuguese Jesuits, Mughal rogues, and Japanese spies for the insane shogunate of Hideyoshi. It was said that the man had gone mad, declaring himself emperor of China, Korea, and the home islands. He was building up an army for something, and that much was certain. I didn't much care, as the Japanese I had met in Hangzhou were cruel little men, drunks, frequenters of the low-caste horror houses. The contempt they radiated at others affected me like a fart in a closed room. If such men came to China to invade, they would soon be sent home again, in boxes. I looked up at the dragon inn sign dubiously, for the stink coming out of its kitchen was frightening. What could they be eating that would... Men emerged from the back rooms carrying fresh dyed silk banners. Ah, I nodded. The inn's owners were also textile merchants. No wonder the accommodations were free here. There was no room to sit in at this time, for the main room was crammed to bursting with fighters come to compete in the tournament. I leaned against the wall behind a stairway, ignoring the others, waiting for night to fall. The chemical stink from behind the kitchen kept me from developing an appetite. That was both good and bad. I had very little money at present, but I would need to be at my peak for the upcoming contest. Chapter 2. I was able to nap against the wall. This freed me of the need to sleep in the great muddle of smelly bodies covering the main room of the inn. All the surrounding rooms were, of course, already rented by nobles and royals. I sleep uncomfortably, but any old soldiers among those who read this account would instantly understand. Sleep trumps food. Food trumps shelter. Shelter trumps sex. Sex trumps everything when you're young and healthy. I did not truck with women, though. I could accept them as persons easily enough. What I feared was the pox. I'd met veteran campaigners whose minds were all but eroded away by the relentless tides of the pox. I had been hazed by the men of the contract warrior companies in which I served, had been called a Jain or a Hindu by locals there in China, all because I was afraid to share that kind of intimacy with my kind. Thing is, my family was Zwinglist, Protestant. My parents lived frugally, carefully. They did not like extravagance of any sort, be it church pageantry or over-expensive displays of position or influence. My parents worked hard and never complained, and they believed in strict monogamy, let no one sunder what the Lord hath ordained. So I ate simply, I dressed simply. I had very little interest in anything but enjoying my travels, avoiding any new wars, piracy, or plague. At age 28, the world was my oyster, and I wanted to live to savor it, every bite. My eating habits were similarly simple. I ate cooked fish or beef, whatever vegetables were at hand, and carried hardtack biscuit with me whenever I could. A piece of hardtack in the mouth on a long journey was useful for both eliciting salivation, but also for softening the hardtack over time enough to chew and swallow. Thus had I stayed slim, wiry, agile, rather than going to heavy muscle like my cousins and uncles, and then to fat. I also had a single food craving, fresh fruit. Here at the capital, oranges, lemons, and mangoes were scarce. Still, I had been well supplied until recently, for thanks to my hard labor on the docks. As I was in food, so was I in friendships. My life had no special habit of it. For my part, I did not want to come to need the society of my fellows. I had done so during 3 wars, and lost every friend to muskets, infection, or plague. Distaff to the ingrained fatalism imposed upon my innocence by military service and experience was the ingrained philosophy of Protestant Christianity, that the individual has worth, is important. Morning found me achy, but hale enough. I made my groggy way to the well, slid through the crowd of slow-dispersing men without attempting small talk. The well's bounty was near frigid despite the warmth of the day. I shivered in it, stuck to my routine of cleanliness with the stoicism of a mountain monk, and I drank deep. Naturally, my distinctive appearance drew comments, ribaldry, cruel laughter. All of that was dust clouds on the horizon, for I was awake, ready to do what I must in order to win that reward of glistening golden tails. These men were the stairs I must climb to reach my rightful place. Their skylarking was the difference between us, the reason I would triumph against them. I reached the board in time to see the herald reading the emperor's words before posting them for posterity. My name was in the 100 chosen to be tested in the twin silver Zen gardens at the east wing of the palace. I was relieved. The sooner I fought, the longer I would have to recover for the next bout. The testing was fascinating. I saw displayed 15 different forms of fighting. Of these, the most interesting were 3. The cuttlefish, as practiced by long-limbed Qi Lung of the southern provinces. Fakir art, represented by Sezade Mog, a rail-thin man with eyes, hair, and skin all black as coal. And the enigmatic Khmer wrestler, Sok Din. All these were men I had heard of. They had formidable reputations. More to the point, they were so much better than their opponents, I was a bit taken aback. My fight came late in the day. I was matched against a spearman from the northern wastes. He told me his name, Audiobook, and saluted. I'm Ghostface, I replied, half bowing. His smile was strained. I know. It was fast. He waited. I did not. That surprised him a little. He expected me to try and coax him into a charge. The spear came in, right on target. But it wasn't. I had reached to the right, looked to the right, was seeming to have made my decision, while in reality I was fading to the left, dancing madly backwards. His thrust missed, and as he turned for another try, I simply continued my dancer's circle. I came in just behind his right shoulder, hammering his ear with the edge of my clenched fist. I also pushed at it after, and kicked his balance leg out with a backward heel sweep. It was beautiful. I had picked it up watching the Jew school practice, behind my old place of employment. Their number 3 had noticed me watching the classes working out from the first floor roof of the warehouse. He told his master, who talked with my boss, and I was fired. Since it took him almost 3 months to realize what I'd been doing on the roof, I felt I was the winner. Those skills I employed now, and they paid back with interest. My Mongol opponent spun as he fell, trying to club me with the head of his spear. I started to fall with him, but only till the spear passed me. Then I stood, leapt aside. I did not want to win my bout by kicking a valiant fighter in the head while he was helpless. He sat in the dust, both hands on the haft of his weapon. I waited, but he could not stand. I had broken his eardrum and ruined his balance. I walked to the winner's area, head down, deep in thought. Chapter 3. 100 fought that day on the dirt of Zen Garden. 16 were killed outright. 22 were severely injured. The remainder spent a lot of time discussing my brief fight. They were now calling me Ghostface Killer, and probably because of the heightened emotion, claiming that I might really be a demon from the Buddhist hell. I did not think my fight had been special in any way, but I learned later, the Mongol who called himself Butterfly had a reputation for being the fastest man alive in a fight. That led me to contemplate my worth in a new light. I had not expected to win so easily. To discover that my man had been one of the famous warriors was troubling and elating all at once. I had thought him a relatively talented amateur. As I was undamaged, I asked to be placed on the roster for another fight as soon as possible. On the 3rd day of the trials, therefore, I was once more in the Zen Garden, this time facing a frail-looking ancient master of the hooked swords. He instantly put me at risk, employing a rolling, spinning dance in which the blades came at me from every and any possible angle. Though he was an instant from slicing me open, I read him like a musketeer reads a running deer. I punched him in the forehead so hard I almost killed him on the spot. He went down, poleaxed, and I almost broke my hand. Though I knew what I was doing, that sort of blow is always attended by dangers to the user. My feeling was that I had won by narrow margins. I felt I was lucky, but the general consensus was that I was a demon from the outer hells. On the 5th day, they matched me against Zhang Zhaojian, Rubber Sword, a well-known hero from the south. This time I asked for a weapon, myself, a stout oaken staff. I figured that he knew well how to fight a staff man, so I was going to use his own expectations to deceive him. That was my hope. On the first pass, I stepped past him, leading him to think I was dead, but trod on the instep of his right foot with all my force and weight. The arch broke. He fell, eyes wide. They gave me no 4th opponent. I had won my place in the new unit. That evening I was called from the inn, assigned to a barracks, and further interviewed by an official named Jin. I told him I understood gunpowder and firearms, which I did. He asked if I believed in ghosts, and I laughed. If I were not a ghost, then there weren't any, I assured him, for who looked more like a ghost than I?